And we are back with author, filmmaker, and environmentalist Ben Raines. So, Ben, your other major discovery has been I'll learn how to speak, the massive prehistoric forest sitting just off our coast in the Gulf of Mexico. How did you find it, and how did you know either where or even why to look?
Well, so I didn't discover it. I was
Okay.
the first person to take pictures of it and the first person to bring it to the world. The guy that owns the dive shop in Fairhope actually found it, a fellow named Chaz Broughton. And the way that the forest was found, after Hurricane Ivan, a fellow was out fishing and he found something that showed up on his bottom machine and started fishing there and catching a lot of fish. And he lost a rod that went over the side of the boat. So he went to the dive shop and asked if they could come look for his rod, because a lot of these offshore rods cost more than $1,000 by the time the reel and everything. So the dive shop went out there, went down to the bottom, just in an open Gulf of Mexico, and saw trees everywhere. So I actually learned to dive at that dive shop, and because I was the environment reporter at the time for the Press Register, the guy kept taunting me, at the dive shop, saying, I'll have to take you to. He called it the old river channel. He kept saying there's an old river channel out there with trees everywhere. And so it took me 4 years to get him to take me out there. So he finally did. And the moment I got down to the bottom, it was stunning. I've been diving all over the place. I've never seen trees rooted in the mud on the bottom of the ocean before. So as soon as I came up, I said, oh, God, we got to get scientists out here immediately. And that was the beginning. I did a story with video, and it went viral, the very first story. This is back about 2011 or so.
What could be its scientific and cultural significance?
So scientific first, what we're talking about is a climate capsule, unlike anything else on Earth. There is nowhere else that we found in the ocean where trees are still rooted in the mud they were growing in that have been exposed. So looking at the mud around those trees, taking sediment cores, we've found, they found very ancient bugs even. So we're getting into Jurassic Park territory. But what we really get is a picture of the Gulf Coast climate 70,000 years ago. And it was not like it is today. We were in an ice age, so it was colder. But you can see that in the pollen that they found there and the seeds of the plants. What it tells us is that it was different than a modern Gulf Coast forest. It was like a forest you would find today in coastal Virginia. So somewhere that it snows, where there's regular frost even at the beach, that's what this forest was built for. The trees that live there, the plants that live there, were much more cold tolerant than what we find on the coast today. So we get a window through the trees into atmospheric levels of carbon and other gases and all that sort of stuff. It is a climate capsule. But then culturally, it's a natural wonder. It's like the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone. It is a natural feature that exists nowhere else on Earth. It's right here off our coast. It is Alabama's. That's the only place you can find it.
And to think that it's here, and then also to think about the fact that it does show such a difference in what the climate is now and what it was then.
Imagine Dauphin Island, Fort Morgan, covered in snow. I love it.
Now, the rest of your work is wrapped up in the wonder and beauty of Mobile Bay and the Gulf, and trying to save it. Your new book seems like the next step forward in that direction. Tell us about the book and why you wrote it.
Well, Alabama is two things. It is the most diverse state in the United States. It has more species per square mile than any other state, and it is the leader in extinctions in the continental U.S. More animals and plants have been lost to extinction in Alabama since the 1800s than any other state except Hawaii. That's a stunning thing. And so we can't go on being, the king of diversity, especially of aquatic creatures, and the king of extinctions. So we've got to make a choice. Alabama has a long history, a relationship with its environment that's all about taking. Never giving anything back, never protecting anything. We have the least funded environmental agency in the United States. It has ranked 50th for, I think, several decades in what it spends to protect the environment. And we have an incredibly aggressive industrial effort, bringing new industries in.
Yeah.
Well, part of that is easy to get permits here and government approval and stuff, but there's no reason we have to sacrifice our environment. So
And part of
the
the
book,
problem is it's attractive, more attractive for them to come here because they have cost savings, because they
exactly.
don't have to do as much here, but it comes at a cost to the environment and these species.
So that's where we get back to that idea I was talking about citizen scientists and citizen activists. We're the watchdogs. We have to do that now. So our environmental groups like the Coastal Foundation, Mobile Baykeeper, etc., they're vitally important because they now are our voice. They are big enough and loud enough that they can help when we point things out. But that's what it's all about. The book is a love letter to make people fall in love with our state and to make them understand that, sure, California's beautiful, but so's Alabama.
What do you mean by America's Amazon, and how far north does it go?
So some people complain that we already have an Amazon in the Americas, but this is America. We're the only country known as America. The Mobile River system, which ends in Mobile Bay, includes every river that drains into Mobile Bay. So it goes all the way up north of Birmingham, the whole state. And parts of Georgia, Tennessee, and Mississippi all drain into it. That is what I call America's Amazon because it is the king of diversity for aquatic species. The Amazon in South America is famous for having all kinds of wild species. Well, look at Alabama. We have 450 species of freshwater fish. The entire state of California has 110.
Why do you think this has never been taught in school about the biodiversity of the Mobile River Basin like we've been taught about the Amazon?
Because nobody knew. So when American biology was in its infancy, all the scientists were concentrated in our great learning institutions from the last century. In the Northeast, you've got Harvard and Dartmouth and Yale and Princeton. Out west, you've got Stanford. And so all these scientists were in those places, cutting their teeth as students, finding stuff. Well, that didn't really happen here in Alabama. This fact of our diversity really came to light in 2002. The Nature Conservancy produced a report through an organization called NatureServe, and they documented all the species in every state. Scientists all over the country were stunned to see Alabama as the leader in the number of fish species, the number of crawfish species, the number of mussel species, the number of snail species, the number of salamander species. Everybody was blown away. And that was the moment where it was suddenly, oh my gosh, Alabama's really diverse.
Now you've said elsewhere that people in Birmingham used to be able to catch mullet from the Gulf. Now,
absolutely.
How? Why? That seems crazy.
So we have a lot of rivers in Alabama, right, that drain down to the Gulf. We used to have almost 24 species of fish that migrated up those rivers, just like salmon do on the West Coast and the East Coast. Striped bass, the mullet, moon eyes. You could go on and on naming all these species. They used to migrate up the rivers, and they were carrying all this energy, just like salmon do. They would go to the Gulf, sturgeon. They would eat in the Gulf for years or a year. Then they would migrate up, take that energy up the rivers and die
Is it kind of like the Auburn Tigers?
Yeah, kind of. So we built 30 major dams and we cut that connection. Fish can no longer go upstream in our rivers. They're stopped by the dams. And so there are people alive today who used to catch mullet in the Cahaba River outside of Birmingham in cast nets.
Now, you've been on the ground and in the waters and in the weeds. What changes have you seen in your years of working on this stuff? Have you seen positive changes?
I've seen positive changes. Our environmental groups are much stronger. In some measure, parts of our environment are doing better. There's certainly a much greater appreciation for all this stuff I'm talking about, the diversity and everything. That's kind of a snowballing thing. And that's all to the good. People care. There are a lot more members of Mobile Baykeeper than there were 20 years ago. You can look just at the staffing of these organizations. 20 years ago, Mobile Baykeeper had a staff of 1. Now they got more than a dozen people, full-time staffers. That's a huge increase. But on the flip side, Mobile is still the largest American city I know of that doesn't recycle, doesn't have curbside recycling.
So, Ben, where can people go to find or buy your book, Saving America's Amazon?
So the book arrived in the United States yesterday. The ship is in New York. The book's going through customs right now. It is already available for sale on Amazon and Target and Barnes and Noble for pre-sale. It's also available for pre-sale signed copies from Page and Palette, which you can have shipped anywhere in the country, and the Alabama Booksmith in Birmingham. But it's going to be in bookstores everywhere starting December 15th. At least I hope. And if it's not in your bookstore, call them. But it publishes December 15th. That's when it'll be available for sale, and that's when those pre-orders ship out. So, it makes a great Christmas gift, even for people not in Alabama, a little hometown pride. And we can thumb our noses at them. We've got more crawfish than you.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, author, filmmaker, and environmentalist, Ben Raines.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. And I hope people love the book.